what was nearing the end, and you wouldn't hear the usual ta-da, wouldn't you think something was wrong? Wouldn't you feel like you were kind of left hanging, or you'd been kind of robbed of your ticket price? Well, you may be surprised to find that similarly, there's a similar situation in the Gospel of Mark, and we're going to talk about that today. I'm very happy to tell you that I have Professor Tom Shepard with me. He is from Andrews University, and he teaches New Testament interpretation. Welcome, Professor.
Good to be with you.
I understand that you yourself are a musician.
Yes, I'm a cellist. I took up the cello some years ago to play with my daughter, who is a violinist, and we put together a string quartet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how would you feel if you went to a symphony orchestra and it didn't quite end?
That would be kind of strange. Actually, I was remembering that one time we played a string quartet that Haydn wrote called The Joke. And it has one of these movements that seems to end, and then it doesn't end, and then it goes on a little bit, and then the very ending isn't the typical ending. So yeah, I'm acquainted with this. That's not the right way to end a string quartet or a symphony. You know, it just wouldn't seem right. Now, this may seem really strange to people. They'll say, why are you talking about music instead of the Gospel of Mark? But let's read Mark chapter 16. That's the very last chapter of the book.
I'm excited about this.
And we're going to hear the story of the resurrection. Mark 16. I'll read verses 1 through 13, and then you take us down through verse 20.
Okay.
When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might come and anoint him. Very early on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. They were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" Looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, although it was extremely large. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." They went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now after he had risen early on the first day of the week, he first appeared to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and reported to those who had been with him while they were mourning and weeping. When they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they refused to believe it. After that, he appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking along on their way to the country. They went away and reported it to the others, but they did not believe them either.
Afterward, he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not them which had seen him after he was risen. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils, they shall speak with new tongues, they shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven, and sat on the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, and confirming the word with signs following. Amen.
Amen.
Now, some Bibles don't include verses 9 through 20, or instead, rather, they're in footnote.
Yeah.
Now, is there a reason for that?
Actually, there is. If people look in their Bibles, you know, King James Bible, you might be reading it, and it goes all the way through verse 20, just like we read, just like Kevin read for us. But many other Bibles, they'll have these brackets, it'll be footnotes, and often they'll say something like, in the earliest manuscripts, this is not included. Now, right here we can say a few words about the manuscripts of the New Testament. We can thank God that the New Testament is the most well-attested document, by far,
Amen,
from the ancient world. We have thousands of documents, thousands of witnesses that tell us about the text of the New Testament. Part of the challenge that scholars face is that no 2 of these documents are exactly alike. Now, there's a number that agree very, very closely, but no two are exactly like. I mean, if we were to sit down 50 people and try to write out, say, the Declaration of Independence or something like that, and we compared them all, we would find that there was a misspelling here, there was a word left out here. Those things happened in the history of the transmission of the New Testament for thousands of years until we get to printing presses. And so the question is, how do you go back and get to the earliest manuscript or get to the actual words of Mark? Well, what's so interesting is there are so many manuscripts that scholars have come up with a series of about 15 rules that they apply to actually get back towards what we think is very close to what was originally written, which is really a wonderful achievement. Now, there are a series of reasons why scholars feel that likely verses 9 to 20 were not original to Mark. Now, somebody may be sitting watching and saying, "That's terrible, Pastor. You mean that part of my Bible doesn't belong there?" And I'll say, just wait, hold on a minute. Almost everything that is said in Mark 16, verses 9 to 20 appears in one of the other Gospels. So it's not as though we're kind of losing information here. So
right, or somebody kind of added in this whole extra stuff, that
yeah, I mean,
wasn't recorded.
we'll talk some more at the end as to, so if this isn't part, where did this come from? But you'll notice that Mary Magdalene seeing Jesus, that appears in the book of John. Two people meeting him out in the country, that's in the Gospel of Luke. The Great Commission, the meeting with the disciples, and then you get some of that in Luke, and then the Great Commission, you get that over in the Gospel of Matthew. And then people not being harmed when they're doing missionary work, you find that in the book of Acts, that Paul gets bitten by a snake. And then the Lord following with signs, that's found in the book of Hebrews. So almost every single detail that's found here in these verses does not appears in one of the other Gospels. Now, I'd like to show on this graphic that we've prepared a series of reasons why the scholars think that this probably was not originally part of the Gospel of Mark. First of all, some of the most important early manuscripts end at chapter 16, verse 8. They just don't have after that verse. Secondly, there are two other endings, a shorter one and a longer one. Now, the one that we read today was the longer ending, but there's a shorter one that's kind of brief. It's only like 2 verses or something, and some manuscripts have that instead of the long ending. So we have some early manuscripts that don't have anything past verse 8. Then we have others that have this long ending, and then some that are even younger, not as old, that have even a shorter ending. So it's really kind of odd. The third point is the longer ending is more ancient than the shorter ending. It seems to go back at least probably to the 2nd century A.D. The book was written in the 1st century A.D. The next point is that the longer ending has a style that is not typical of the Gospel of Mark. There are certain words that appear there. There are certain ways of writing Greek that just seem actually, frankly, more polished than Mark's Greek. Mark's Greek is kind of the poorest Greek of any of the 4 Gospels. Doesn't mean you can't understand it. Doesn't mean it's it's readable, but it just doesn't have the same polish that, say, the Gospel of Luke does. So this longer ending really has a style that doesn't quite seem as the same. Lastly, several early church leaders do not know of the shorter or the longer endings at all. So this long ending from verse 9 to 20 is actually older than the shorter ending that's added on to some other ones. All of these characteristics put together drive scholars to the opinion that the book really ends in verse 8. However, that is a very strange
place to end
the gospel. And we'll come to that as a moment. We want to go back to verse 1 and start reading through from verse 1 again.
Okay, let's do that.